Hi everyone, welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting of the 5th of November 2025. I'm joined here with a fellow Node.js TSC member to discuss a couple of issues that have been on our agenda for a long time and that we want to clear. So this is kind of a special meeting to some extent to just cover those, and then we can jump in. Anyway, before doing any of that, are there any announcements? Nope. Okay. There is no board meeting update since last time. So any CPC updates, Joe? No. Okay.
No, I don't think so. I can't recall anything.
Okay. Then it's time to talk about issue 1754, update charter with communication responsibility. Or do we want to talk about the self-serve model for funding Node.js work first? I think the charter is more important, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, Darshan, do you want to present the issue?
Yeah, sure. So the pull request is basically a change to the charter that tries to describe how the project can participate in communications, external communications. So the project, at least in this PR, would focus on the technical communications, like representing the technical community on that. So we haven't really had much update on the PR. We're still waiting for review, so I'm not really sure how we can make progress on this.
James, if I recall, you had some additional, an alternative proposal, if I recall.
Yeah, there's I have a separate pull request, 1756. That is takes a different take on the communication question. I'm gonna apologize. The dogs are getting riled up here in the background, so I'm getting a little bit of barking. Yeah, it really comes down to, I think, some of the language in Darshan's proposal. I think one, it's a bit too vague. Two, it kind of tries to cover things that the project itself doesn't actually have oversight over, like the technical community. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that cover? What does that encompass at all? And so I think I think the other take, the other PR kind of gets a little bit more closer to the things that we can actually have oversight over. But just see where the competition goes to figure out which one is the best approach.
The pull request actually lists out the specifics from line numbers 78 to 85 of the kinds of things that this is going to allow. Is that something that's going to work?
Assuming that the question was directed towards me. So I think I think the bullet point on line 77, establishing a stewarding consensus seeking process to represent the technical community and its work. That has no real definition, like, what technical community, what does that cover? So I think that's a key sticking point. The rest, I mean, it's just tends to be just kind of vague about what the actual responsibility is. Part of the reason this came up originally was because a couple of TSC members had issue with the foundation making statements that seem to be on behalf of the project. I don't see how this actually addresses any of those concerns. Right. I think we need to have a clear delineation between what is the responsibility of the project versus what is a responsibility of the CPC versus what is responsibility of the foundation. A clear line that kind of separates those, but also recognizes that the foundation is as much a part of the technical community as we are. So it's I don't know. I mean, just this way that this PR is structured just doesn't strike me as actually moving the ball forward.
I'm not really sure about this at this point.
Like, for example,
yeah.
in your PR, you have a paragraph here. If a node-specific communication channel, such as a social media account or discussion forum, is established by another party and used to represent the technical work of the technical community of the project, the TSC may request administrator or moderator access. But I mean, why? Like, we don't need to be in every forum. Like, if somebody, if a member of the project, for instance, creates a podcast where they talk about what's happening in the project, we don't need administrator access for that. There's, I just think that this PR just tries to overreach what the actual responsibility of the project and TSC actually is. Does that make sense? It's not scoped appropriately to what our actual responsibility is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, if I can, I have slightly a more practical problem with Darshan PR, okay, which is you know, consensus seeking, okay? We do consensus seeking on a lot of the technical topics, right? Unfortunately, for final and public communication, it's very hard to do it efficiently. And we tried in the past, it just not. It worked for small things where everybody's in agreement, but then if there's no agreement, it's we are kind of missing the moment. Okay, so it's essentially is my generic problem with this approach. Okay. Essentially. And also the discussion is all the things are already listed more or less in what are the TSC responsibilities. So I don't necessarily think we should rate all of them essentially. And it's the fundamental question on there is like you can't, it's very hard to run, like we have a lot of different take on the strategy on what Node.js should behave and of what the Node.js public position should be, okay? But it needs to have one. And if we seek by consensus seeking, okay, is which it should strive to, okay? But it needs to be very reactively, very quickly, usually, and we cannot take 2 weeks to decide for a tweet or a blog post or anything, essentially.
Maybe we can time box that to like something smaller, like 24 hours, maybe.
But when you even it gets so rather difficult. The other thing that we have to recognize is that, for consensus seeking is fantastic when the group of folks that you're seeking consensus with are all fully aware of the issues and are, or at least fully knowledgeable of the issues. Most of us are engineers. We're not marketing folks. We don't necessarily have the context. We don't necessarily have the background. We don't have the day-to-day involvement in or watching particular social channels and trends in the market and that kind of thing to be able to actually make decisions quickly about what's going on. We end up spending most of our time like, wait, what's going on? Okay, educate me on this before I can actually come to the point to be able to make a decision. This goes to Mateo's point, is like we have to be able to respond quickly. And if everything becomes a bureaucracy, if everything becomes a consensus thinking, everything takes a couple of weeks, we miss everything that's relevant because it just takes too long. Making code changes is one thing because those typically don't need to be urgent, right? But a lot of times marketing messages they're a point in time. But I think it still goes back to the fundamental question of, do we even need to control it? Right? Do we need to control the messaging? Is that something that we have to be responsible for? And this idea of like if any other third party, says that they're going to talk about what the project is doing, we don't need to be involved in that, right? That's not something we need to have oversight over, regardless of how long it takes, or regardless of what the consensus seeking is. It's just not our place.
I do agree with that. Like, I don't think the project really is super interested in all parts of the communication, maybe just some of those. So like the kinds of things that have been listed there. So there can still be disagreement with the foundation on these topics. So that's something that we would need more collaboration on, and that's something that the charter doesn't allow at this point. So if we want to collaborate with them on communications, it needs to be in the charter.
Oh, I agree that something needs to be in the charter, which is why it's like I have the other proposal, right? It does add some of this ability to um, um, have this communication, have this shared responsibility, and delineate it. I just think we need to be very careful about not overstepping. Like it's one thing to say, hey, we need to collaborate more with the foundation on communication. It's something else entirely to say if there's any third party that creates a channel, we're going to insist on having oversight over it. They're two very different things.
James, my problem on this is, so okay, to be clear, I have a question for Darshan. Okay, in the PR, there's written the TSC may request administrator or moderator access to ensure representation is aligned with the consensus within the project. Okay. How do you see that happening?
I think this is for cases where if someone represents the community, or it seems like they're doing so, and the project actually doesn't have consensus on that, or maybe just has a very different take on that, it kind of charters that we will be able to go ahead and communicate that to them, the communicating party.
But we can do that without having administrative access or moderation access.
So okay, so what I'm understanding is publicly the Node.js project will say A, then publicly the Node.js project will say B and retract A, if I understand correctly what you're saying.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I personally don't think that would be a good thing for the project.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's better to not never arriving in that situation.
Or at least we can still communicate the disagreement with the communicating party so that next time they won't make that mistake.
But yeah, I think it's important, like, who are we talking about? Like part of the earlier discussions earlier in the year was almost casting that like the foundation was a third party. And it's like, and that they were speaking on behalf of the project. Well, yeah, they have the right to. They're not a third party. They're part of the project. Now, certainly it is the case that any one of us could make a statement about the project that is incorrect. If we find out that it's incorrect, then it's like, okay, oops, we made a mistake. We misspoke, said something wrong. Here's the reality. Making corrections is always a possibility, but I think the key of the dispute was who speaks for the project. And several CSC members were like, well, the foundation shouldn't be speaking for the project. Well, yeah, I think that's a fundamental disagreement, because personally I say yes, they do, because they are part of it. So I think we need to kind of resolve who are the third parties we're talking about, right? The pro charter update just says third parties. It doesn't specify, right? So that could be anyone, right? I could go off and create a podcast and say, hey, this is what's happening in the project. James, you're doing that wrong. We're going to take over the podcast. No, that doesn't make any sense, right? So it's as worded, the charter proposal is just too broad and too vague to actually be effective, in my opinion.
Something that I see missing in your PR, James, is some statement on alignment, okay, between the public image and the consensus of the project. That does not require access, but it's should be there, I think.
One thing that we've never had within the project is what is the project's actual view on XYZ topic, right? We don't have that. Back when Winter TC was being formed, Winter Community Group, right? We had this discussion about, well, hey, will Node be listed here? Like, can we say that Node is involved? Because the committee was being founded by a Node technical steering committee member and other Node core contributors, but we couldn't say Node was involved because these individuals can't speak on behalf of the project, of the entire project. Then we had this long discussion, months and months and months about, well, okay, how do we figure out if the project has decided to do something or not? That's a fundamentally different problem. How can the foundation, the folks that we have there, the marketing experts that have the training, go out and like advertise for the project and say, hey, Node is doing this, and then somebody from the project says, no, we're not. No, we didn't. No one's ever decided that we're doing that. Well, it's because we don't have a process. We have no process for actually saying what the project is or is not doing, right? No one speaks for the project, but everyone does, right? So I think the question of alignment, right? We don't even know how we are aligned within the project. How do we establish that we're aligned with the foundation messaging, right? So I think there's a fundamental problem there. That we cannot insist that other people be in alignment with us if we don't even know what our own alignment among ourselves is. That makes sense?
If there is alignment, at least within the project, then I think we should be able to reach out to the third party and correct them.
If there's some wrong piece of information, if somebody says, hey, we shipped X, Y, and Z and we didn't, I mean, that's an obvious thing that we don't need alignment on. There's just reality, right? We just point out that, hey, you made a mistake. And we can do that without a charter update. Anyone can do that, right? We've done that in the past with stuff. Mistakes happen. We don't need a charter update to give us permission to go correct errors.
But what about cases where we want to post about something and then the foundation doesn't really agree with that, and they're just not expanding on the topic?
Define we. Like if an individual member of the project says, hey, I'd like to post on this, and the foundation folks say, well, we don't think that that's a good idea. That's not a we statement. That's a disagreement among individuals, right? If the project as a whole, if the TSC has a meeting and comes up and says, we want to push this particular topic, right? And we're collectively deciding, and we have consensus, kind of this loose, lazy consensus among the TSC that this is something we want to talk about, then I 100% believe that the foundation would say, cool, all right, let's work on that. Let's push that out. Let's get the messaging around that. But if an individual comes up and says, hey, I want to talk about this one thing, there's not consensus among the project to talk about that one thing. It's just one individual wanting it. So we have to have, again, it goes back to that whole consent, that whole issue. How do we decide that we have alignment amongst ourselves that any particular thing is what we want? We have no process for that. And so we can't insist that other people fall in line with a process that we don't have.
What I'm thinking about is something that actually already happened. So, we have this recurring post in the Node.js Twitter account where it's basically posting about jobs in the Node.js space. So I previously asked in the TSC, like it was visible to all the TSC members, if we could do something similar for jobs that are specifically about contributing to Node instead of just using Node. And I got some upvotes, and I brought this up with the communication folks, and it just didn't move forward. And yeah,
Okay. I mean,
there's like no way to make progress on that.
the foundation folks, man, we hire them to, they're not necessarily hired. We work with them specifically to give us advice in the areas that we are not experts in, legal and marketing and branding and these kinds of things. So, like, to a degree, like, we should trust their advice on these things. If they're like, we really don't think that this is something that is a good use of this channel, then okay. But what we should do, like, if we really think that there's something that needs to be talked about, then we bring it back to the TSC. We say, okay, well, the foundation folks disagree for XYZ reasons. Do we think that these are good reasons? If not, let's get the foundation folks in the room and actually talk it through and figure out what we want to do to collectively. It's not an adversarial thing, us versus them, our opinion versus them. It's like, okay, well, we have differences of opinion, just like we would, we would have a discussion if we had differences of opinion among TSC members, discuss it, and come up with a joint decision. All right. We should be trying to seek to have more conversations with the foundation folks to work through these issues collectively, collaboratively.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But in this case, it it didn't like it wasn't even clear whether this was a disagreement because it felt more like stalling to me. Uh, they said that they're going to bring it up in the next meeting, but then I just asked them after a month and another month, and it just didn't move forward. So I don't even know if they don't want to do this or they're just stalling. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
I won't call this collaborative. So yeah, I would definitely appreciate more collaboration from their side too.
all right. Well, I mean, we have to open the door for it. Like, inviting them, inviting the marketing folks, to TSC meetings, having a conversation about it, checking in to see where things are at. But just like here, that happens on the TSC meetings. Sometimes items are on the agenda for months before we get around to addressing them. Sometimes it's just not the highest priority thing that we need to discuss, and so it gets pushed off, or maybe not all the people are in the room, or there's not enough information, or whatever. There's lots of reasons why things get pushed off. It doesn't mean that that we're not being collaborative. It just means that it's not the right time to talk about that item, or we don't have the right context yet. So I don't think we can or should automatically assume that there's some malicious intent for it not being discussed or decided. right? There's processes there's ways of following up on that that can help move it forward.
Yeah, I agree. Like there should be an escalation path there. So it's something that we should have processes for, and we don't have processes for those at this moment.
Now one thing that I think, like that's not well defined right now is when there is a disagreement over how to move forward, how is the disagreement, how is the logjam cleared? How do we actually get beyond it so that it's not just left undecided, right? Who has a final say? And I think this is another area of the disagreement that we've had over the past year, is that some folks seem to think that the TSC has the final say in all things. And that's not necessarily true. Like, we don't own the brand. The project doesn't own the brand. The TSC does not manage the brand. The TSC is allowed to use the brand by the foundation, which owns it. Anything that deals with brand management, the foundation has final say. They own it, right? So it's like I think we have to be clear about whose responsibility things are. The Twitter handle is part of the brand. It's not part of the project. It's an aspect of the brand communication, right? So in terms of what goes out on the Twitter channel, using that Node.js brand, right? The foundation really does have final say over that. Now, if we want to have a separate channel that we have control over, that we have the final say over, then we need to work that through. Like discuss that with the foundation and establish that boundary, right? So that it's something that we have the final say over and we control what happens there. But if we're going to do that, we have to have a process where we're actually determine what we're all in alignment on saying. Or we have to delegate responsibility to somebody we trust to make those decisions for us. All right. So I do think that there are things that we need to get clearer about. And I don't care if my charter PR is the one that lands or not. I really don't care about that aspect of it. What I care about is the roles and responsibilities between the foundation and the project have to be clearly defined. And we have to make sure that we don't get into this phase of we're thinking that the foundation is some third party. They are just as much a part of the project as we are, right? Robin has been, executive director. She's been involved with Node for longer than I have, and I've been here for like 10 years. Like, she's been involved with the community. Like, she may not write code day to day, but she's as much as part of the community as all of us here are. And so it's like, it's not, the foundation is not just a third party. They are us. They are part of the project, right? So getting a clear set of roles and responsibilities defined is fantastic. I think that's absolutely what we need to do.
I guess we would need assistance from the foundation to like create a divide on the kinds of responsibilities that we can have as a project, and yeah.
And I think Matteo makes a point in one of the comments in my PR that some of the things that are in there actually should be handled by the CPC and be in the CPC charter. I absolutely think that needs to move forward. Is like having a clear delineation on some of these topics, particularly around brand marketing, and the various communication channels that a project can leverage. Those roles and responsibilities need to be much more clearly defined. And I think it's actually the responsibility of the CPC to actually define those.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess we need some kind of communication from the foundation on this.
Yeah, I think having a conversation with the CPC, just kind of talk about like some of these gaps that we see. Joe, Mateo, I'm looking at the two of you to kind of, maybe hopefully kind of help lead this part of the conversation with CPC. We obviously do have a gap in what is the realm of responsibility. Like who is primarily responsible for the marketing channel? Right, and like and these communications channels that we have. Whose responsibility are they? Like, who, is there such a thing as a final say, right? Does that lie with the project? Is there a clear distinction between technical discussion and marketing discussion, right? We just kind of need some of these gaps addressed so that we don't have these kinds of kind of like vague, disagreements over vagaries again.
Okay. Talking about next step. Okay. Joe, are you here, right? Are you still with us, Joe?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think we can work together on the next CPC call to bring an issue to the table on addressing the communication responsibility in the charter? I'm volunteering somebody, and I don't like volunteering somebody. I'm asking if you have some slots to.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is that this week was the working session. Next week is the regular meeting,
Yeah.
but maybe the week after we could do it in a working session and really kind of dig into it and spend some time.
Yeah, that will be cool. Can you, facilitate the organization? Sorry to ask.
Yeah,
It's for the Tuesday 18th, right?
Tuesday the 18th.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that is correct. I'm looking right now. Yeah, Tuesday the 18th. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, let's maybe you and I just kind of work on it in Slack and
Yeah.
just make sure we are.
Yeah, I think we have identified that there is a gap at the CPC level in what projects can communicate and use the communication channels, and I think it should be discussed at that point. And then, because anyway, the we can link the two PRs in the charter, but our charter and change. But to be honest, it's we need to clarify this at the CPC at this point, because it's very much unclear what are the project responsibilities versus the foundation responsibilities on brand management and so on and so forth.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
I think in addition to that, right, just within the TSC ourselves, right, we need to discuss and figure out how do we make decisions about what we want to see as far as technical communication and project communication is concerned. It should not be the case that individuals go to the foundation folks and say, "Hey, I'd like you to publish this on behalf of the project." And it's not clear if that person actually had any kind of consensus behind them or not, right? It needs to be, the project wants to communicate this, right? Ask the foundation to help. We have no process around that. We have no process around, like, how do we actually decide what is the message the project wants to get out? And I think that that's something that we need to address. How to address it, I don't know. Right? I don't, it has the risk of inviting way too much additional bureaucracy, but it's something that we should at least give some thought to.
Is that something that would that is blocked by the work in this
No, that's
charter
not.
change?
It's not. I don't think it is. It's that's the same. It's not, because we can decide what are our statements, okay, and we can collectively put them out in whatever form we like, okay. We need to decide on a lot of public positions generically. To clarify, there was a problem in the past on the standards. Okay, how do we communicate with the TC39 and other standard bodies? And we have these repos, which is standard positions. Okay. And which went nowhere. Okay, be clear. We have two issues. One is TC39, and it's there was a lot of discussion on the topic. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify the that there was, but we need something that will be can be effective. Okay, I don't know what it is, but
Okay, so this sounds like something that we can still do in parallel on the side, like writing up these processes.
Yeah, I would think so. We have to be careful. It's like we can't, like in having one of the conversations, like how do we decide? Like we have to be careful we don't overstep and say, oh, we get to decide what other people do. We don't, and that's what the CPC conversation, like that separate conversation, will delineate. It's like, what is that role and responsibility? So that this other conversation is just about how we come to a conclusion, like of what messaging we want.
Let me clarify. I don't see, even without any charter change or anything, if the project believed, I don't know, that we want to support some public work, then I don't think the foundation will or the marketing team will complain. Or in other terms, we want to do a campaign on how people should join the Node.js contributors and how great it is to contribute to Node. Okay, I don't think it will be a problem. Okay, now doing a tweet on, is there a job that involves Node.js core collaborators? My Node.js core work might not be big enough for the wider audience, but doing a campaign on the topic of contributing to Node might be something that is more or less more in the wheel for an account with more or less 1 million followers.
Yeah,
and to be honest, the one for collaborators, promoting people joining as collaborators, or promoting companies that are sponsoring Node.js work and PRs and so on and so forth, is all connected to the other topics. So this is what I'm saying. Might not be that just doing a tweet, but if we want to, can you do a little bit of a campaign on this topic? I think is viable.
Yeah, and I will say, based on conversations I've had with Robin and marketing team folks, the biggest issue they have, and the biggest like the thing that they're going to say absolutely no every time on, is if it comes across as somebody is just trying to use the channel for self-promotion, right? Or to promote just a couple of people, or basically just kind of like trying to leverage this channel that's got 1 million followers just to say, hey, look at what I'm doing, as opposed to look what the project is doing, right? Here's the project messaging. Here's what here's what the project needs. Not, hey, sponsor me, right? Kind of thing. There's a key distinction between that. And and on some of the requests that the marketing team have received, that was their perception, that it was a self-promotion, not a project promotion. and they draw the line at that self-promotion. And personally, I think they're very much right to.
By the way, I did post a link to a recent tweet where we are promoting an individual on the official Node socials.
Sorry, where did you post? Did you link?
It's in the Zoom chat.
Okay, sorry.
This is the user land migrations.
Yeah, I think so.
That's not promoting an individual. I mean, that's promoting a project that we as a project has decided we're going to support.
It does mention an individual in the post, though.
It's fine to mention an individual, right? Like the difference here is user line migrations is something that we collectively, the GSC, has decided we're supporting this project, get the message out about this. That like what I'm talking about with promoting an individual would be like an individual contributor going to the foundation and saying, hey, retweet this thing where I'm asking for sponsorships, right? Or I'm looking for a job, or so-and-so is looking for a job. Can you retweet that? That is looking at that is promoting individual people, right? And it could even be like if I tweet something on my personal account and the project, and somebody on the marketing team retweets it, they're not promoting an individual. Right. It's amplifying messaging about the ecosystem and the project and that kind of thing. That's a fundamentally different thing.
Well, it's kind of the same thing that got rejected last time, though.
What got rejected last time? User line migrations, like I said, this is an official project, a thing that the project is doing.
For example, single executables is also such a thing. It's a strategic initiative of the project, and I was looking for such a tweet, and that got rejected by the foundation with no explanation.
What specifically was requested?
Um,
Was it, hey, we're doing single executable applications, here's how they work? Or was it like, hey, I'm looking for support to keep working on this?
The second one.
Okay, that's the difference, right? If you're talking about just the project, this is important to know. This is why. Here's how it works. Here's who's working on it. That's different messaging than, hey, if you want to keep doing this up, pay me to work on it. Those are two very different approaches and two very different angles.
It's still a project goal, though, so I'm not sure what problem there is.
Okay, let me clarify this a little bit in a way that might be clearer. Okay, the projects. So our official communication needs to be relatively sensitive in how we ask for funds, okay, and how we ask to support causes and so on and so forth, okay? So one thing is to say, look, it is thank you, Darshan, for your great work on single executable applications, okay? It is a nice guide for using it, okay? Another thing is asking, please pay James to add support for HTTP3 in Node. Okay, to be I hope it's relatively clear. Okay, this is the balance, the barrier between the two. One is asking for money, the other one is saying, oh, this is great. Okay, this is a new piece of tech. Look at this doc. Thank you for putting it together. Thank you for adding this feature, okay? Thank you for keeping working on this feature, okay? There is a difference between the two, okay? And which is like every request in asking, if you see that there's been a few string of discussions, it needs to be very clear on, like it's very tricky to do that, and saying, look, the foundation does not ask for, like, if you see the Node.js project, okay, you see the Node.js project, and we need significant amount of monetary support for our infrastructure and other things, okay, and Joe and myself, we sit on the board, we know the balance sheet, okay, and we know how tight our balance sheets are, okay. However, you have never seen the Node.js project saying, please put money here in the bucket, okay. You have never, like, the Node.js project have never done that, okay. It's not something that has been done, okay. So to clarify, it's not just about one thing. It's the full theme of fundraising, okay. It's not covered in that communication, okay. This is I hope it's not about not promoting something, okay. It's about promoting, it's about fundraising, okay. It falls into, that will fall into the fundraising box, okay. And that's why it was like, we have the spotlight program. Essentially, we have, like, we could promote some individuals, and we are happy to promote we are happy to promote individuals pushing for things. We cannot provide, it's very tricky for the foundation to fund work, to ask for money, essentially, in that way, and without sounding that is that you're respecting all the laws for non-profits and everything, and not bending like others do, but this is a different topic.
Yeah, this could be framed differently, though. So similar to the other post that I linked. Yeah. But yeah, that would still need some assistance from the foundation.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this is where this, I think, is where things got a little bit blocked. Okay, like, to be honest, let me rephrase. We might decide as a Node.js TSC to ask the foundation, please, foundation, can you please run a campaign for, getting funds for our CI or our testing infra or our build system. Okay, this might be something that we can ask, hey, foundation, we need this support, please run some fundraising. Okay, this is something that we can ask. Okay, but it needs to come from, more or less, with the TSC hat, essentially. And I've been pushing for this, by the way, for our infrastructure issues, and Richard knows that problem very well. Yes, hopefully.
And I'll say it's even the case that as the TSC, as a project as a whole, we could collectively decide at any point to say, hey, you know what? We think that XYZ project is super important, but we know Darshan, Changjiang, whatever, they don't have the time to work on it right now. If they had more money available, if they had funding, then they'd be able to work on these things. We could decide as a project to promote and ask for funding for those individuals. So the project can ask, hey, support this one individual, and while they're doing this work. It's a fundamentally different thing than that individual going to the project or going to the foundation and saying, hey, promote me so I can do this. All right, it's a different ask. All right. Now, no, I would think that the foundation would still push back and say, why are we pushing an individual when it's a group project? Like, we should be.
That will not
That's a
fly.
different thing.
James,
That's a different thing.
that will not fly. The fundraising will need to pass through the foundation for whatever meaning necessary, and then go and then be dispersed. But this has been done for a lot of different things, so this is not. This is essentially.
But what I'm saying is like there's the point I'm saying is that there's a fundamental difference between the project deciding something to promote something and the individual asking for that. You know, and you know, the foundation would still push back in either case. But you know, there is a difference, and we have to keep those differences in mind. Like what the project can ask for versus what an individual contributor can ask for.
You can like you can ask for it. It's possible to ask for it in our own channels. Okay, but I like in the Node.js, OpenJS accounts, and so on and so forth need to stay as neutral as possible, essentially. And these also mean, because there are a lot of different companies involved, so it cannot seem to be promoting something that is not promoting something else, essentially. Like in it's because then, you know, if you, okay, I want funding, okay, to rewrite the HTTP server stack, okay, and I need to work on that for a couple of years. So how do I go with it? I would like Node.js definitely need a new HTTP stack on the back, a new HTTP1 stack on the backend. We are all in agreement with that. Okay. How can we get the funding? Okay. Sorry to be putting out a lot of things here. Okay. We are at time. Okay. I think it's I would go to end the live stream. I think we made some progress here. Okay, I am with James and me have some action items. Okay, and we will need to reconvene on these issues in the one of the next meetings. Okay, so I think we can move them forward, and we kind of know exactly what are the gaps that needs to be closed and filled and clarified who is responsible for what at the CPC level, okay, and then decide exactly how that would play out.
Okay.
Perfect. Can you please stay all on for a second after we leave, guys? Just a second. Let me stop the live streaming.